The morning air was crisp as 17-year-old Maya stepped out of her mother's old sedan, her white cane tapping against the cobblestone driveway. She could hear the distant sound of a piano drifting through an open window somewhere above them. Someone was practicing Rachmaninoff, and they were good. Really good. "We're here, sweetheart," her mother said softly, gently touching Maya's shoulder. "The building is even more beautiful than the pictures showed. There are these huge stone columns at the entrance and—" "Mom," Maya interrupted with a small smile. "I don't need to know what it looks like. I just need to know where the audition room is." Her mother squeezed her hand. Maya knew she was trying to help, trying to paint a picture of the prestigious Thornfield Conservatory that Maya's eyes could never see. But Maya had stopped caring about what things looked like years ago. What mattered was what they sounded like, what they felt like, what they meant. They had left home at 5 in the morning for this. 3 hours of driving through winding mountain roads, her mother sipping gas station coffee while Maya practiced finger exercises on her lap, playing invisible keys and hearing the music in her mind. This audition was everything. For 2 years she had dreamed of studying here, of learning from the best piano instructors in the country. As they walked through the entrance, Maya's cane detected the change from outdoor stone to polished indoor marble. The space opened up around them, and she could tell from the echo of footsteps that the ceiling was high, the hallway wide. Expensive, intimidating. "Excuse me," her mother called out to someone. "We're looking for the audition hall. My daughter has an appointment at 9:30. Down this corridor, take a left, then it's the third door on your right," a young woman's voice replied. Then after a pause, Do you need help finding it?" Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest. That pause, that shift in tone. She had heard it 1,000 times. People saw the cane, saw the dark glasses, and suddenly their whole voice changed. Some became overly sweet, talking to her like she was 5 years old. Others became uncomfortable, like they didn't know what to say or how to act. "We'll be fine, thank you," Maya said firmly, trying to keep the edge out of her voice. They found the waiting room easily enough. The moment they entered, Maya could sense the tension in the air. She heard the rustle of sheet music, someone clearing their throat nervously, fingers drumming against a chair arm. There had to be at least 15 or 20 other students here, all waiting for their chance to impress the judges. "There are 2 empty seats near the window," her mother whispered. As they made their way across the room, Maya heard the whispers start. She couldn't make out the exact words, but she knew the tone. She had heard it at her high school talent show, at local piano competitions, even at her own church recital. Surprise, curiosity, sometimes pity. And occasionally, though people tried to hide it, doubt. She sat down and placed her cane beside her chair, resting her hands in her lap. Her fingers were cold despite the warm building. Nerves. She took a slow breath, the way her first piano teacher had taught her years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Find your center. Remember why you're here, did you see that? Someone whispered from across the room, not quite quiet enough. "Shh," another voice hissed back. Maya's mother tensed beside her, and Maya reached over to pat her hand. "It's okay, Mom, really." But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. Maya had worked twice as hard as any seeing student to get here. While other kids her age were memorizing music by reading it off a page, Maya had to learn everything by ear, by touch, by repetition. She would listen to recordings hundreds of times, her fingers mapping out each note on her old upright piano at home, until the piece became part of her muscle memory. She had given up weekend parties, summer vacations, even her senior prom to practice. Her friends didn't understand. How could they? They didn't know what it was like to live in a world that constantly told you that you couldn't, that you shouldn't, that you were chasing an impossible dream. The door to the audition room opened, and a tall boy walked out, his face flushed and eyes slightly red. He had either done really well or really badly. Maya guessed badly from the way his footsteps dragged across the floor. "Next," a sharp voice called from inside. "Candidate number 12. A girl near Maya stood up, smoothing her dress. "That's me. Wish me luck." "You'll do great," someone replied. The girl disappeared into the audition room, and the door closed behind her with a heavy thud. Through the thick wood, Maya could barely hear the muffled sound of a piano. The girl was playing something classical, maybe Mozart. It was hard to tell through the door. Maya's hands were shaking now. She pressed them together, trying to steady herself. She was number 18. 6 more people before her turn. 6 more chances to lose her nerve and walk away. Maya Chen, her mother read from a text message on her phone. Your grandmother says she's praying for you. And your old piano teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, sent her love. She says you've got this. Maya smiled despite her nerves. Mrs. Rodriguez had been the one who believed in her first, back when Maya was just 8 years old and had shown up to her first lesson with a cheap keyboard and a head full of dreams. Everyone else had suggested that blind children might prefer other hobbies. Music therapy, maybe, something less demanding. But Mrs. Rodriguez had looked at Maya's small hands on those plastic keys and said, You've got pianist fingers. Let's see what you can do. The audition room door opened again. The girl who had just played emerged, and she was grinning ear to ear. He said I had excellent technique, she whispered excitedly to her parents. Maya's stomach twisted. He. That meant Victor Petrov was in there. The Victor Petrov. The man was a legend. He had trained students who went on to play in the world's greatest concert halls. He had performed with symphonies across Europe. He was known for his brilliance and his brutally high standards. He was also known for not suffering fools. 4 more students went in and out. Some looked happy, others looked crushed. Maya listened to each one, trying to calm the storm in her chest. Then finally a woman stepped out into the waiting room and called out, Number 18, Maya Chen? Maya stood up, her legs feeling like water beneath her. Her mother stood with her, ready to guide her into the room. I've got it, Mom, Maya said quietly. I can find my way. Are you sure? I'm sure. She picked up her cane and walked toward the voice, toward her future, toward the moment that would change everything. Her cane tapped against the doorframe and she stepped inside, feeling the space change around her. The room was larger than the waiting area. She could hear at least 3 people breathing, maybe 4. The piano was to her left. She could smell the wood polish on its surface. Miss Chen, a man's voice said. It was cold, clipped, with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe Russian. This had to be Petrov. Please approach the piano. Maya walked forward carefully, her cane sweeping in front of her. She found the piano bench and sat down, folding her cane and setting it beside her. Her hands found the keys, and she let her fingers rest there for just a moment, feeling the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips. This was it. Everything she had worked for came down to this moment. Before we begin, Petrov's voice cut through the silence like a knife. I must ask you something, Miss Chen. Maya turned her head toward his voice. Waiting. What exactly do you think you're doing here? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Maya felt her throat tighten, but she kept her voice steady. I'm here to audition for the conservatory, sir. Same as everyone else. She heard Petrov shift in his chair. Papers rustled. Someone else in the room cleared their throat uncomfortably. Same as everyone else, Petrov repeated, his tone making it clear he disagreed. Tell me, Miss Chen, how long have you been playing piano? Since I was 6 years old, sir. 11 years. And you've been blind since birth, I assume? Maya nodded. Yes, sir. Another pause. She could feel his eyes on her, studying her, judging her before she had played a single note. Her hands rested on the piano keys, waiting ready. But he wasn't asking her to play. He was asking questions. Lots of questions. How do you read music? His voice was sharp, clinical, like a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. I learned Braille music notation when I was young, Maya explained. I can read Braille sheet music, and I also learn by ear. I listen to recordings and work out the notes, then I practice until I have the piece memorized. Memorized. Petrov said the word like it tasted bad. So you don't actually read music in real time. You memorize it beforehand. Many concert pianists perform from memory, sir, Maya said carefully. It's not uncommon. It's not the same thing, and you know it. His voice had an edge now. What about sight reading? In this conservatory, students are expected to look at a piece they've never seen before and play it. Can you do that? Maya's jaw tightened. No, sir, not in the traditional sense. But I can learn pieces quickly by ear, usually within a few hours of first hearing them. A few hours. Petrov's laugh was dry, humorless. Our students sight read in minutes. What about ensemble work? How do you plan to play with an orchestra when you can't see the conductor? I count measures, sir. I feel the tempo through the vibrations of the other instruments. I've played in my school orchestra for 3 years. My conductor wrote a recommendation letter. It's in my application file. A high school orchestra, Petrov said dismissively. This is a professional conservatory, Miss Chen. We prepare students for careers as concert pianists, as teachers at prestigious universities, as performers in the world's finest venues. Tell me honestly, do you truly believe you can compete with students who have full use of all their senses? Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. Behind her in the waiting room, she knew her mother was probably pacing, worried, hoping everything was going okay. If only she knew. I believe I can play piano as well as anyone, sir, Maya said, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. I wouldn't have traveled 3 hours to be here if I didn't think I had something to offer. Something to offer, Petrov repeated. She heard him stand up, heard his footsteps as he walked closer to the piano. Miss Chen, I'm going to be frank with you because I think you deserve honesty rather than empty encouragement. I've been teaching piano for 30 years. I've trained students who have performed at Carnegie Hall, at the Royal Albert Hall, at concert venues across the world. I know talent when I see it. There was that word again. See? And I also know, he continued, his voice closer now, when someone is chasing a dream that simply isn't realistic. You seem like a determined young woman. I'm sure you've worked very hard. But hard work isn't always enough. There are physical limitations that cannot be overcome by sheer willpower. Maya's fingers pressed against the piano keys, not hard enough to make a sound, but hard enough to feel the resistance, the solid reality of the instrument beneath her hands. You could teach piano at a community center, Petrov went on. You could give lessons to beginners, children perhaps. That would be a respectable career, something meaningful. But trying to compete at this level? I'm afraid you're setting yourself up for disappointment and failure. Sir, another voice spoke up. A woman's voice, one of the other judges. Perhaps we should let her play before we make any decisions. Dr. Williams, Petrov said, and Maya could hear the tightness in his voice, the irritation at being questioned. I understand your sympathy, but we have 40 other auditions today. 40 talented students, all with their sight intact, all fully capable of meeting the demands of our program. Is it really fair to them to waste time on a candidate who clearly cannot meet our basic requirements? With respect, Maestro, Dr. Williams said, and Maya liked her immediately for the steel in her voice. We haven't heard her play yet. That seems rather important, don't you think? Silence. Tense, uncomfortable silence. Then Petrov spoke again, his voice tight. You're right, of course. We should let Miss Chen play. It wouldn't be fair to reject her without hearing her perform. He paused, and Maya could hear the but coming before he even said it. But I want to be clear with everyone in this room. We are not a charity. We are not here to make people feel good about themselves or to encourage unrealistic dreams. This conservatory accepts only the very best, and I will not lower our standards for anyone. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, but crack. Like ice on a frozen lake at the first hint of spring. And underneath that crack, something hot and fierce began to bubble up. I'm not asking you to lower your standards, sir, she said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. I'm not asking for charity or sympathy or special treatment. I'm asking for the same thing every other student here is asking for. A chance to show you what I can do? Fine, Petrov said coldly. Show us, play whatever you prepared. Let's get this over with. Maya took a breath. Her hands were shaking, but not from nerves anymore. From anger. From years of people telling her what she couldn't do, what she shouldn't try, what was impossible for someone like her. She thought about walking out. She thought about standing up, grabbing her cane, and leaving this room with whatever dignity she had left. Let them have their conservatory. Let them keep their precious standards. But then she thought about something her grandmother had told her once years ago. Her grandmother, who had immigrated to this country with nothing, who had cleaned houses and worked 3 jobs to give her children a better life. When someone tries to make you small, her grandmother had said, you grow bigger. You show them what they're too blind to see. Too blind to see. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. She positioned her hands on the keys, finding the starting position for her prepared piece. Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire. Some pianists spent years mastering it. Maya had learned it in 6 months, practicing 4 hours a day until her fingers ached and her back screamed in protest. But before she began, she turned her head toward where Petrov's voice had come from. Maestro Petrov, she said quietly, you said you know talent when you see it. And maybe that's true. But let me ask you something, yes? His voice was impatient. If you closed your eyes right now during my performance, would the music sound any different? Would the notes be less beautiful if you couldn't see my hands playing them? She didn't wait for an answer. She turned back to the piano, closed her eyes, though it made no difference to the darkness that was always there, and let her fingers find the first chord. Music isn't about what we see. Maestro, she said softly, her fingers poised to play. It's about what we hear, what we feel. And right now I'm going to show you something you've been too busy looking at to actually hear. And then she began to play. The first notes came soft and gentle, like rain beginning to fall on a quiet afternoon. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with a tenderness that seemed to pull the sound from somewhere deep inside the piano itself. The opening of Chopin's ballad was deceptively simple, almost innocent, but anyone who knew the piece understood what was coming. In the audition room, the three judges sat frozen. Petrov had his arms crossed, his face set in stone, determined not to be impressed. Dr. Williams leaned forward slightly, her pen hovering over her notepad. The third judge, a younger man named Professor Chen who hadn't spoken yet, simply closed his eyes and listened. Maya didn't think about them. She couldn't afford to. Right now there was only the piano, only the music, only the story she was telling through Chopin's notes. Her fingers knew every key, every distance, every subtle weight needed to make the piano sing rather than just play. The melody began to shift, growing more complex. Her left hand started a rolling pattern while her right hand danced above it, weaving in and out of the rhythm like a bird learning to fly. This was the part where most pianists started to show strain, where the technical difficulty became obvious. But Maya's face remained calm, almost peaceful, as if she and the piano were having a private conversation that no one else could hear. In the waiting room outside, the whispers had stopped completely. Students who had been practicing their own pieces had paused, drawn to the sound coming through the heavy wooden door. It wasn't loud, but somehow it filled every space, every corner, every empty place in their hearts they didn't know existed. Maya's mother stood near the door, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She knew this piece. She had heard Maya practice it 1,000 times in their small living room, working through difficult passages over and over until they became second nature. But this was different. This wasn't practice. This was Maya pouring everything she had ever felt, everything she had ever been told she couldn't do, into every single note. The music built higher, faster, more intense. Maya's hands flew across the keys now, executing runs and trills that would make experienced pianists sweat. But there was no hesitation in her movements, no fumbling, no missed notes. Every sound was exactly where it needed to be, crisp and clear and absolutely certain. Petrov uncrossed his arms. He tried to maintain his stern expression, but something was shifting in his face. He had heard this ballade performed by some of the finest pianists in the world. He had performed it himself countless times. But there was something different about the way this blind girl was playing it, something raw and honest that most trained pianists lost somewhere along the way. The piece moved into its darker section, the part where Chopin's genius really showed through. Minor chords crashed together like waves against rocks. Maya's whole body moved with the music now, swaying slightly, her shoulders rising and falling with the emotional weight of each phrase. Her fingers struck the keys with controlled power, drawing out sounds that seemed too big to come from just one instrument. In the hallway outside, a janitor had stopped his cleaning cart to listen. A group of teachers on their way to a meeting had paused mid-conversation. Music had a way of doing that, of stopping time, of making everything else disappear except for what was happening in that exact moment. Dr. Williams had stopped taking notes. Her pen lay forgotten on her clipboard as she watched Maya's hands move across the keyboard. She had been teaching at this conservatory for 15 years, and she had seen talented students, brilliant students who could read any piece of sheet music and play it flawlessly. But talent and technique weren't the same thing as artistry, and what Maya was demonstrating right now was pure artistry. The music softened suddenly, pulling back from the storm into something quieter, more introspective. This was the part that always made Maya's mother cry during practice sessions. It sounded like loneliness, like hope, like someone searching for light in darkness. Maya played it with such tenderness that several people in the waiting room found themselves blinking back tears without quite understanding why. Professor Chen, The youngest judge opened his eyes and glanced at Petrov. The older man's face had gone pale. His jaw was clenched tight and his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. But he wasn't angry anymore. He was something else, something that looked almost like pain. Maya didn't see any of this. She was lost in the music, in the world inside her head where colors were sounds and emotions were melodies. Her fingers knew what to do without her having to think about it. Years of practice, years of memorization, years of living with this piece until it became part of her own heartbeat. The ballad built toward its climax, the part where everything came together in a rush of power and emotion. Maya's hands moved faster, stronger, covering the entire range of the keyboard. High notes sparkled like stars while low notes rumbled like thunder. The piano seemed to come alive under her touch. No longer just wooden strings and hammers, but something breathing, something feeling, something real. In the waiting room, students who had been practicing their own audition pieces were now wondering if they should even bother. How could anyone follow that? How could anyone compete with the level of emotion and skill they were hearing through that door? Maya's mother had tears streaming down her face. She had always believed in her daughter, had always known Maya was special, but even she hadn't fully understood until this moment just how extraordinary her child was. This wasn't just good playing. This wasn't just impressive technique. This was the kind of performance that happened maybe once in a generation. The final section approached, the part that tied everything together. Maya's fingers flew through the complex passages, never stumbling, never hesitating. She knew exactly where every key was, could feel the distance between notes in her bones. The music swelled to its peak, filling the room with sound that was almost too beautiful to bear. And then suddenly, it was over. The final chords rang out powerful and definitive, and Maya lifted her hands from the keys. She sat very still, her breathing slightly heavy, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The three judges sat frozen in their chairs. In the waiting room, students stared at each other with wide eyes. Even the janitor in the hallway stood motionless, his hand still gripping the handle of his cleaning cart. The silence stretched on. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. Maya began to worry. Had she made a mistake? Had she played something wrong? She couldn't see their faces, couldn't read their expressions. All she had was the silence, and silence could mean anything. Then from somewhere in the back of the waiting room, someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Then someone else joined in. And another. And another. Within seconds, the entire waiting room had erupted in applause. Inside the audition room, Dr. Williams stood up, clapping hard, a huge smile on her face. Professor Chen joined her, shaking his head in amazement. But Petrov remained seated, his hands gripping the armrests, his face unreadable. Maya turned her head toward the sound of applause, confused. Was this good? She had never heard applause during an audition before. She wasn't sure what it meant. That was extraordinary, Dr. Williams said, her voice thick with emotion. Miss Chen, that was absolutely extraordinary. Indeed, Professor Chen added. I've been judging auditions for 5 years, and I've never heard anything quite like that. But Petrov still hadn't spoken. The room grew quiet again as everyone waited for the maestro to say something. Anything. Finally, slowly, Petrov stood up from his chair. Maya heard him move, heard his footsteps approach the piano. She turned toward the sound, waiting, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. When Petrov finally spoke, his voice was completely different from before, softer, almost broken. Miss Chen, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. Petrov's footsteps stopped right beside the piano. Maya could hear him breathing, could sense him standing close. The room felt impossibly small suddenly, like all the air had been sucked out of it. I owe you an apology, Petrov said, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word. Maya sat very still, not sure she had heard him correctly. The great Viktor Petrov apologizing to her? What you just played, he continued slowly, was one of the finest performances of that ballad I've heard in my entire career. And I've heard it played by masters, by concert pianists who have spent their entire lives perfecting their craft. Maya felt her throat tighten. She didn't trust herself to speak. But that's not what I need to apologize for, Petrov went on. I need to apologize for what I said before you played. For the way I treated you, for assuming I knew what you were capable of before giving you a chance. He paused, and Maya heard him take a shaky breath. There's something I need to tell you. Something I've never told anyone in this conservatory. Not the other teachers, not the students, not even the board of directors. Another pause. 40 years ago, when I was 25 years old and already performing in concert halls across Europe, I had an accident. Maya turned her head slightly toward his voice, listening. I was in a car crash, Petrov said quietly. A drunk driver hit us head-on. My wife was driving. She died instantly. His voice caught and he had to stop for a moment before continuing. I survived, but I lost most of the vision in my right eye. The doctors said I was lucky. Lucky to be alive. Lucky to still have one good eye. Lucky that I could still play piano. In the corner of the room, Dr. Williams gasped softly. Professor Chen leaned forward stunned. Even Maya, who couldn't see Petrov's face, could feel the weight of what he was saying. I was terrified, Petrov continued. Terrified that people would think I was less capable. Terrified that orchestras wouldn't hire me. Terrified that students wouldn't want to learn from a teacher who was, in their eyes, damaged. So I hid it. I learned to compensate. I turned my body slightly when I played so people wouldn't notice. I memorized everything obsessively so I wouldn't have to struggle with reading music. I became even more demanding, even more perfect, as if perfection could somehow make up for what I had lost. Maya felt tears building behind her dark glasses. She understood. God, she understood exactly what he was saying. For 40 years, Petrov said, his voice barely above a whisper now. I've lived with this secret, this shame. And then you walked in today with your white cane, so open about your blindness, so unashamed. And I was angry. Angry? Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Yes, Petrov admitted. Angry at your courage. Angry that you dared to be honest about something I've hidden my entire career. Angry that you refused to let your blindness define what you could or couldn't do. While I've let my partial blindness control every decision I've made for 4 decades. He pulled out the chair next to the piano and sat down heavily, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. When I saw you walk in, I saw myself. The self I could have been if I'd been braver. And I couldn't stand it. So I tried to push you away, tried to make you leave before you could show me what I've been too afraid to see all these years. The room was absolutely silent. Even the applause from the waiting room had died down. Everyone was holding their breath waiting. What you played just now, Petrov said, was not the performance of someone who is limited by their blindness. It was the performance of someone who has used their blindness to understand music in a way that most of us never will. You don't see the piano. You feel it. You don't see the music. You become it. He stood up again and Maya heard him move toward the judge's table. Dr. Williams, Professor Chen, he said formally, I move that we accept Maya Chen into our conservatory immediately. Not only accept her, but offer her a full scholarship. And if she is willing, I would like to be her primary instructor. Maya's breath caught in her throat. A full scholarship? Being taught by Viktor Petrov himself? This couldn't be real. This had to be a dream. I second that motion, Dr. Williams said quickly, her voice warm. Absolutely. That was remarkable, Maya. Truly remarkable. Third, Professor Chen added, though I think we should also give you the option of choosing your instructor. Miss Chen, after the way you were treated earlier, I would understand if you preferred to work with someone else. The question hung in the air. Maya sat at the piano, her hands still trembling slightly from the performance, her mind racing. Should she accept? Could she trust Petrov after everything he had said to her, after the way he had tried to humiliate her? But then she thought about what he had just revealed. The pain of losing his wife, the fear he had carried for 40 years, the courage it took to admit his secret to a room full of people. That wasn't nothing. That was everything. Maestro Petrov, Maya said slowly, turning toward where she thought he was standing. You said you know talent when you see it. But I think maybe both of us have learned something today. What's that? Petrov asked. That the most important things can't be seen with eyes. They have to be felt with the heart. Maya paused. You hurt me today. You made me feel small and unwelcome. But you also just showed me more courage in 5 minutes than most people show in their entire lives. So yes, if you're willing to teach me, I'm willing to learn from you. She heard Petrov let out a long, shaky breath. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for being more gracious than I deserve. There's one condition, though, Maya added, and there was a small smile in her voice now. Anything, Petrov said. You have to stop hiding. No more pretending. No more shame about your eye. If I can walk around with my white cane, you can be honest about your vision. Deal? There was a long pause. Then Petrov laughed, a real laugh, the kind that sounded like it came from somewhere deep, that hadn't been touched in years. Deal, he said. Though I have to warn you, I'm a demanding teacher. I expect perfection. Good, Maya said, standing up from the piano bench and picking up her cane, because I expect the same from myself. Dr. Williams was busy writing up the acceptance paperwork, but she looked up with a smile. Welcome to Thornfield Conservatory, Maya. Something tells me you're going to change this place. Professor Chen nodded in agreement. I think she already has. The door to the waiting room opened and Maya's mother rushed in, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed Maya in a tight hug, not caring that she was interrupting official conservatory business. I'm so proud of you, she whispered into Maya's hair. So proud. Maya hugged her back, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had done it. She had proven everyone wrong. But more than that, she had helped someone else see the truth about themselves. As they prepared to leave the audition room, Petrov called out one more time. Miss Chen? Maya turned back. That ballad you played. Where did you learn it? Maya smiled. From a recording. Your recording, actually. The one you made in Prague in 1998. I must have listened to it 500 times. Petrov stood speechless. That recording had been made just 3 years after his accident, when he was still learning to hide his damaged vision, still grieving his wife, still trying to prove to the world that he was whole. I always wondered, Maya said softly, why that recording sounded so different from your others. So raw, so honest. Now I think I understand. She walked out of the room with her mother, leaving Petrov standing alone with the 2 other judges. He stared at the piano where she had just played, where she had just shown him what real courage looked like. Dr. Williams walked over and put a gentle hand on his shoulder. Victor, she said quietly, I've worked with you for 12 years and I never knew about your eye. I know, he said. I'm sorry I never told you. Don't be sorry, she said. Just promise me you'll stop hiding now. Petrov looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in 40 years, he didn't try to turn his head to compensate for his bad eye. I promise, he said. 3 months later, Maya sat in one of the practice rooms at Thornfield Conservatory, working through a particularly difficult passage from a Liszt concerto. Her fingers stumbled over the same section for the 3rd time, and she let out a frustrated sigh. Again, Petrov's voice came from across the room. And this time, don't think about the notes. Feel the emotion behind them. Liszt wasn't writing exercises. He was writing passion. Maya took a breath and started the passage again. This time something clicked. Her fingers found the rhythm, the flow, the story hidden inside the complicated runs and chords. Better, Petrov said. Much better. Take a break. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and stretched her shoulders. These practice sessions with Petrov were intense, sometimes lasting 3 or 4 hours. He pushed her harder than any teacher she'd ever had. But he also understood her in ways others never had. How are your other classes going? Petrov asked. She heard him moving around the room, probably straightening sheet music or organizing his notes like he always did. Good, Maya said. Music theory is challenging but interesting. And Professor Chen's composition class is amazing. He's teaching me how to write my own pieces. I heard you played at the student showcase last week. I'm sorry I missed it. You were in Boston with the symphony. It's okay, Maya smiled, though I wish you could have been there. I played one of my own compositions for the first time in public. How did it go? I was terrified, Maya admitted. Playing other people's music is one thing, but putting your own work out there, letting people judge something you created, that's scary, and, Petrov prompted, and people actually liked it. Some students came up afterward and asked for copies. One girl even cried. She said my piece reminded her of her grandmother who passed away. Petrov chuckled softly. That's the power of honest music, Maya. When you're not trying to impress anyone, when you're just being truthful, people feel it. They connect to it. There was a comfortable silence between them. Over the past 3 months, they had developed an easy rapport. Petrov was still demanding and sometimes frustratingly precise, but he was also encouraging in ways Maya hadn't expected. And true to his promise, he had stopped hiding his damaged vision. Just last week, during a faculty meeting, he had openly discussed how he adapted his teaching methods to work with his partial blindness. Several other teachers had been shocked, but his honesty had opened up conversations about accessibility and different learning styles throughout the conservatory. Can I ask you something? Maya said. Of course. Why did you really become a teacher? After your accident, you could have kept performing. You were famous. You could have had any career you wanted. Petrov was quiet for a long moment. Maya heard him sit down in the chair by the window. After the accident, he finally said, after I lost my wife and my eye, I didn't want to play piano anymore. Music reminded me of everything I had lost. But my old teacher, a man named Dmitri, came to visit me in the hospital. He was 80 years old at the time, barely able to walk, but he made the trip anyway. What did he say? Maya asked softly. He said that tragedy either destroys us or transforms us, and that music, real music, doesn't come from perfection. It comes from understanding pain, from knowing what it means to lose something and still find reasons to create beauty. Petrov's voice was thick with emotion. He told me that I could spend my life hiding from what happened, or I could use it to become a better musician and a better teacher. Someone who understood that technical skill means nothing without heart. Maya felt tears behind her glasses. He sounds like a wise man. He was. He died a few years later, but his words stayed with me. I became a teacher because I wanted to pass on what he taught me, but somewhere along the way I forgot the most important part. I became obsessed with perfection again, with proving I was still valuable despite my limitations. I lost sight of what really matters. And what's that? Maya asked. The truth, Petrov said simply. Being honest about who we are, what we've been through, and letting that truth shape our music. You reminded me of that. You walked into that audition room completely yourself. No apologies, no pretending. That takes more courage than playing a perfect scale. The practice room door opened suddenly and Dr. Williams poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, she said cheerfully. Maya, there's someone here to see you. Says she drove 4 hours to meet you. Maya stood up confused. Who is it? A high school music teacher from upstate. She has a student, a blind boy, who wants to learn piano. His parents saw the article about you in the newspaper last month and they wanted him to meet you. To see that it's possible. Maya's heart swelled. The local newspaper had run a story about her acceptance into the conservatory, focusing on her audition and Petrov's revelation. She hadn't expected it to reach so many people. I'd love to meet him, Maya said. Where is he? In the main hall. His name is Tyler. He's 13 and apparently hasn't stopped talking about you since he read the article. Maya grabbed her cane and followed Dr. Williams out of the practice room. Petrov walked with them, his footsteps steady beside her. In the main hall, a young voice called out nervously. Is that her? Is that Maya? Hi, Tyler, Maya said warmly, moving toward his voice. I'm Maya, it's nice to meet you. You're amazing, Tyler blurted out. I mean, sorry, that's probably weird to say. But you are. I've been playing piano for 2 years, but everyone keeps telling me I should try something else. Something easier. But then I read about you, and my teacher, Mrs. Patterson, drove me here so I could meet you. Maya smiled, remembering how she felt at 13, full of dreams and doubt in equal measure. Can I tell you something, Tyler? She said gently. There's going to be a lot of people who tell you what you can't do. They'll have all kinds of reasons why being blind makes certain things impossible. And sometimes they'll really believe they're helping you by managing your expectations. So what do? Tyler asked, his young voice earnest and hopeful. You prove them wrong, Maya said firmly, not because you're angry or trying to get revenge, but because you know your own truth. You know what's inside you, what you're capable of, what brings you joy. Nobody else gets to decide that for you. She heard Tyler sniffle, trying not to cry. His mother's voice spoke up, thick with emotion. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to him, to all of us. Petrov stepped forward. Tyler, how would you like to hear Maya play something? She's been working on a new piece. Really? Tyler's voice rose with excitement. Could I? Only if you promise to keep playing piano, Maya said with a grin. No quitting, no matter what anyone says. Deal? Deal, Tyler said firmly. They all walked to the conservatory's main concert hall, a beautiful space with excellent acoustics. Maya made her way to the grand piano on stage, Tyler and his family sitting in the front row. Petrov and Dr. Williams sat a few rows back, giving them space. Maya settled onto the bench and placed her hands on the keys. She had been working on this composition for weeks. A piece inspired by her audition day, by Petrov's story, by every moment in her life when someone told her she couldn't. She called it Unseen Light. As she began to play, the music filled the hall with something hopeful and triumphant. It had moments of darkness, passages that spoke of doubt and fear. But it always returned to light, to joy, to the unshakable certainty that some things can't be dimmed by circumstance or limited by what others believe is possible. Tyler sat transfixed, tears rolling down his cheeks. His mother held his hand tightly. Mrs. Patterson, his teacher, closed her eyes and smiled, knowing she had made the right choice bringing him here today. When Maya finished, Tyler jumped to his feet and applauded wildly. His family joined him, and soon Petrov and Dr. Williams were on their feet too. Maya stood and bowed slightly, then called out to Tyler. "Your turn. Come up here and show me what you've been working on." "Really?" Tyler sounded shocked. "Really? Every musician needs an audience. Come on." Tyler made his way to the stage with his cane, his steps uncertain but excited. Maya helped him find the bench and then stepped aside, giving him the spotlight. As Tyler began to play a simple Mozart sonata, his technique rough but his heart evident in every note, Maya stood beside Petrov at the side of the stage. "You're going to be a good teacher someday," Petrov whispered to her. "I learned from the best," Maya whispered back. Petrov smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, both the good one and the damaged one. For the first time in 40 years, he felt no shame about either of them. Later that evening, after Tyler and his family had left with promises to visit again, Maya sat alone in the practice room. She wasn't playing, just sitting quietly, thinking about how much had changed in 3 months. Petrov knocked on the door frame. "Still here?" "Just thinking," Maya said. "About what?" "About how a few months ago I almost let you convince me to give up. I almost walked out of that audition, but you didn't." "No," Maya agreed. "I didn't, but it made me realize something. We spend so much time trying to prove we can do things, trying to earn our place, trying to convince people we're good enough. But the real battle isn't with them. It's with ourselves. With the voice in our own head that wonders if maybe they're right." Petrov sat down beside her on the piano bench. "And how do you silence that voice?" "You don't," Maya said softly. "You just play anyway. You show up anyway. You keep going anyway. And eventually the voice gets quieter, because you've proven to yourself, not to anyone else, that you belong exactly where you are." They sat together in comfortable silence, teacher and student, both of them learning, both of them growing, both of them finally free from the weight of hiding who they really were. Outside the practice room window, the sun was setting over the conservatory grounds, painting the sky in colors Maya couldn't see but could feel in the warmth on her face. And somewhere in a small town 4 hours away, a 13-year-old boy was practicing piano in his living room, playing with more confidence than he'd ever had before, finally believing in a future he had almost given up on. Some stories don't end. They just keep playing, one note at a time, creating ripples that reach further than anyone could have imagined.